Hello friends, welcome back. In the first video in this lecture series, I introduce you to the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard and a word he used to describe the feeling we all carry without naming it. He called it despair. In this particular video, I intend to dig deeply into the exposition of despair as it is found in the writings of Søren Kierkegaard. It is important to understand his account of despair, because once you understand this account precisely, something within shifts. You tend to recognize more clearly things in your life or things about your life that were always there, but you were not able to name them. And as any good therapist would tell you, naming something is the first step you can take to gain freedom from it. Kierkegaard wrote more elaborately about despair into one of his writings that is called The Sickness Unto Death. In this particular book, Kierkegaard describes despair not as sadness, not as depression, but it is a condition of a self failing to recognize itself. In Kierkegaard's account of despair, it is important to understand that his understanding of human being is a combination of two polarities. On one hand, there is what he calls necessity. It simply underscores all that you currently are, right? Yes, the circumstances in which you are placed, your sociological conditioning, your biological makeup, right? Ethno-religious conditioning, and the rest of it. And on the other hand, there is possibility. You have the possibility to be free from your conditioning. You have the possibility to become something that you are currently not. Right? A healthy self is able to keep both these polarities in perfect balance. And despair is that which results when this balance is offset, when this balance collapses in either of the two directions we discussed. So let's discuss first what he calls the despair of possibility. Now, despair of possibility is a condition where people are lost in a state of mind where they are confronted with infinite choices and they don't really intend to make any choice. What does it mean? It means that they are intelligent, they are imaginative, they can clearly see what they might become. What they cannot do, however, is to make a choice, because the act of making a choice in their mind limits the range of possibilities. To choose one possibility out of so many possibilities to close off other possibilities. So they remain permanently in motion, always planning, always reconsidering, always procrastinating the choice, keeping every door open. And in the meantime, obviously nothing is built. The self remains unformed. The self remains incompleted. The self remains unconstructed. Now remember one thing in existentialist philosophy. Self is not something that exists from its own side. Self is not something that is God-given. right? Self is something that you create. You create by making choices and living with the consequences of those choices. The good thing is, the self that you want to create is something entirely in your hand. Now, we live in a world that has made this despair of possibility something extremely ubiquitous, because today, in this particular age, we are confronted with endless choices. We are always confused. We don't know what choice is right for us. The society we live in, the families of which we are a part, the friend circle in which we coexist, everybody has a whole bunch of opinions. And all these opinions do not give us any clarity, but they confuse us even more. And this makes existentialist philosophy all the more relevant today. The cultural message seems to be this, that keeping your options open is wisdom. But Kierkegaard would say that message precisely produces the kind of hollowness we experience when we have been circling for years and still do not know what life is for, in our case, in our respective individual case. The self is not discovered, as I mentioned. It is something that we create all the time by making choices and by living with the consequences of of those choices. And this part is very, very important, so keep this in mind. Now think of a person who has spent 3 years contemplating whether to change careers, 6 months choosing between 2 cities to move to, more than a decade keeping a relationship at arm's length because something better might still arrive in his life. His phone is full of saved articles about opportunities he never pursued. He always talks about, his conversations are full of what he's thinking of doing next. It feels exhausting to be with such a person. And these people are most exhausted by themselves. Now think of a person with genuine talent who starts everything but finishes nothing. It is perhaps the purest case of possibility of despair. Beginning feels like freedom because everything is still possible or everything is still open. Finishing means accepting that the real thing will always fall short in comparison to the original imagined one. So they never finish and they never become anything. This is not ambition, this is the despair of possibility in its purest modern form. A life lived entirely in the anteroom, waiting for the moment to begin. The despair of necessity is the next topic that we would go on. The second form is almost the opposite form of despair, right? Compared to obviously the first one that we have already discussed. This is the person who has lost all sense of hope, all sense of possibility, all sense of becoming. He looks at his life and sees only what is fixed, what is already determined and unchangeable. Kierkegaard says possibility is like oxygen for the spirit. You cannot breathe without it. This person is suffocating. Not because their circumstances are terrible, but because they have stopped believing that anything that life can be otherwise, that anything could actually change. They stopped dreaming somewhere in their 30s and called it maturity. Think of a person sitting in a glass building on the 32nd floor, or commuting 90 minutes each way through metro. That smells of other people's exhaustion, doing work that stopped meaning anything to them years ago, for a salary that funds a life that they no longer feel is there. They're not unhappy in any dramatic sense. They simply feel nothing much at all. The weekends are recovery, the holidays are an escape, and Monday always comes back. They have confused the absence of catastrophe with the presence of a life. Kierkegaard would say that confusion is itself the condition he is describing. That is the condition of despair of necessity. Now, there is another form of despair that Kierkegaard categorized as the most dangerous form. The most common form also, the most common form of despair and the most dangerous one, is not knowing that you are in despair. So this is more like a state of mind where you are dissatisfied, but you're clueless as to why you are dissatisfied. There is no visible crisis. You have a life that is functioning, that is working. You're able to maintain relationships. You are fulfilling all the obligations. Everything appears more or less adequate. But underneath there is a self that is deeply, deeply dissatisfied and that has never been fully inhabited. A life that is being lived on the surface, but without ever going to the depth where genuine selfhood resides. That quite persistent feeling that something essential is missing in your life, that your life is not quite yours, is not weakness or ingratitude. In Kierkegaard's framework, it is a signal. The self, from whatever depth it has managed to maintain, sending up a flare. There is more than this. Explore it. With this, we come to the end of this particular lecture. I hope that after today, the despair of not knowing is a little harder to maintain. Not to cause distress, but because awareness is itself the beginning of something new, something meaningful. It is important that we critically examine our lives. It is very important we critically look into what we are doing, why we are doing it. Are we happy? Do we want to do something else? What are our options? Are you scared of making choices? Are you scared of making bad decisions? It is important to examine all these things. Are you stuck in a rut? Do you think life is going to stay just like this without any change? Have you lost meaning and purpose of life? All of these are questions related to despair. And I want all of you to honestly go over all these questions and come up with your own answers. This process of self-examination is very important because until and unless you choose to examine critically all these aspects of your life will not change, and the happiness that you're seeking from your life will not arrive in your life. In the next video, we are going to discuss Kierkegaard's 3 spheres of existence, his map of the different ways a human life can be organized, and the question of which one you are actually living in. One of the most practically useful frameworks in all of philosophy. Thank you for listening in, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.